Oh, the pressure's on now. Mike Cahoon's The Scion Conspiracy was the first indie book submitted to me for review. Mike actually reached out before I'd even decided to start accepting submissions, and his request and a few others from people in the Indie Fantasy Club are the reason I even considered doing this. So, while every other book review I've done until now was without the author's consent, they didn't ask for any of that. Mike and everyone else who has submitted absolutely did ask for it. They may regret it, but they asked for it.
No fluff writing advice. Cut the fluff!
Full disclosure, I'm recording this at the end of a long day, so hopefully I don't stumble over my words too much. We'll see. Anyway, I was a little nervous going into this one. I don't want to verbally incinerate anyone's book, except maybe those sketchy AI authors. Their books should burn. Maybe they should too. But when it comes to genuine authors, just trying to make their way in the world, making your way in the world today takes everything you've got. My point is, I'd rather support authors than tear them and their books down. Luckily, I have mostly positive things to say about this book, so let's start with some well-earned praise before I, not incinerate, maybe lightly sear the Scion conspiracy. Let's start at the start. The prologue instantly drew me in. The viewpoint character Sam is being called by an unknown voice. Oh, that's unsettling. And you can feel Sam's uncertainty as he grapples with what to do. The prologue presents a mystery. Who is this? Why is this happening? What do they want? And compels you to want to read more. Essentially, it does everything a great opening should, which is great because as much as the prologue drew me in, chapter 1 almost pushed me out. But I'll get to that soon. The Scion Conspiracy, I hope I'm saying that right by the way, has a solid cast of viewpoint characters. I was worried at the start when Cassius and Jace are introduced. They both act like angsty teenagers for a minute there, maybe a minute or two, and I thought, oh no, here we go, another young adult angst fest. Daddy won't let me do the things. Fortunately, the author doesn't bang on about it for too long, and both characters, all the characters really, are distinct, and the viewpoint shifts are well managed, well structured, and they keep the story feeling fresh. The world building feels natural. It's a deep and realistic world with history and that lived in feeling. It's not your typical swords and wizards fantasy, although there are plenty of swords and wizards, arcanists, but there's also gunpowder and steam power. So the tech's moving into more of an industrial stage, and some tech does integrate with the magic, which is turning into a big part of the plot. I'm interested to see where that eventually goes. Artificing. There we go. I also love how the characters use metaphors based on who they are, where they grew up, or what they do for a living. For example, Jace, a sailor, uses sea-based metaphors, makes sense, whereas another character who grew up in swamplands gets a little swampier with his metaphors. The nuances do make sense. For the most part, the dialogue is distinct for each character and crafted to not only convey character, but also their background and station in life. Somewhere at the start, I actually cringed because the dialogue sounds stuffy and awkward, and I thought, oh no, I'm in for an entire book filled with clunky dialogue. Then I realised, oh, it's just the nobles that sound like utter knobs. That checks out. Everyone else speaks more naturally, so yeah, there are some nuances there that I grew to appreciate. I also appreciate how none of the viewpoint characters overshadow the others. There are no god tier Super Saiyan chosen ones. Everyone has their own strengths and weaknesses, and they each experience their own struggles and sources of conflict. Overall, the tension ebbs and flows nicely. Towards the end, the tension skyrockets, and no one's getting an easy win. Really, no one's guaranteed a win at all. This ain't no cozy fantasy, that's for sure. Characters can and do suffer. I will say some characters are more compelling than others, at least for me. I do have some critiques there, but I'll hold on to them for now. Almost there. The magic system is a tough one to talk about. It's not an in-your-face system. You can go entire chapters without magic even being a factor. It's very integrated into the world, subtle at times, has plenty of practical uses, and being magical doesn't necessarily make someone powerful. After reading a lot of progressive fantasy lately, it is refreshing to see magic take more of a background role in a story. It's still a big part of the narrative, but you're not constantly getting slapped in the face with spells. Speaking of slaps to the face, it's time to slap down some critiques. So, I mentioned earlier that chapter one pushed me out of the story, and it did for a bit there. We go from that well crafted prologue to almost straight into a fight scene. There's a reason start your story with action is generally bad advice. For a fight to the death to feel tense and high stakes, readers need to be invested in the outcome, they need to be invested in the characters involved. When you're thrust into a fight scene with a character you don't know, you don't care. We get a few lines of dialogue from Cassius and a little characterization, but we don't know him well enough to feel invested. Live, die, whatever. Who are you anyway? Oh, he's a prince. Is that supposed to make me care? He's royalty, everybody. Everyone cares about royalty. Royalty's important. The thing is, the fight scene itself is well written. Even so, it lacks tension because at that point, I don't know the character. I don't even know why he's there, and I'm just waiting for it to be over so I can get some answers. After that scene, the characters involved celebrate at a tavern, and there's a conversation that explains a lot, but it feels like most of that conversation could have and should have taken place before their little expedition. That way, you get to know the characters, you know why they're there, you know their relationship to one another, and suddenly you're invested in the outcome of the fight. So, in my opinion, a reworking and restructuring of the first chapter would have made that action scene way more impactful. Thankfully, it gets better from there, and it pulled me back in. Oh, hang on. Now, this only happens a handful of times, but some chapters start with huge, towering walls of description. It could be describing a city or describing the hold, the big fortress, and these descriptions aren't technically attached to a viewpoint character. It's almost like the narration switches to some National Geographic presenter who wants you to know every little detail about a location. There's no dialogue woven in, no actions from the viewpoint character. You don't even know who the viewpoint character is. Are we still telling a story here, or have I wandered onto a tour bus? In most cases, descriptions are well woven into the narrative. Like I said, this only happens a few times, but some descriptions are so detailed they actually disconnect you from the scene, ironically, or fail to connect you in the first place because they're not describing a scene, they're describing an entire setting. To be fair, the descriptions are well written and they do help create a distinctness between the different settings. Also, I know some people love those over described scenes and settings, my trash, your treasure, all that, but I'm more about plot and character, so I see a wall of description and I want to demolish it. Some scenes made me laugh because they're somewhat illogical. Look, there may be reasonable explanations, but a few things made me go, huh? One, the Emperor asked a servant or whoever it was to fetch three specific people, and those people arrive in like 30 seconds. Did they all just happen to be standing just over there somewhere? How convenient. Or when characters arrange a meeting and state the time as later this evening, whatever, she'll be right. That's a broad window to work within. What are the chances you both show up at the same time later this evening? Actually, do they even measure time in this world? I don't recall any clocks. Maybe later this evening is the best they can do. Throughout the story, there are a few how convenient moments. I won't go into them all, but some situations and outcomes seem somewhat forced to serve the plot rather than feeling like natural progression. Occasionally, characters act weirdly or unnaturally, seemingly in the name of plot advancement. It only happens a few times, but it's enough for me to notice. Alright, here's one. Apparently, Jace can't come up with an excuse for being out late at night when there are plenty of reasons to be out late at night. He mentioned night classes in the previous scene, and this just starts a whole situation. There may be reasonable explanations for these instances, but at a glance, I see forced plot progression. Also, sometimes the characters say things for the benefit of the reader rather than as a natural part of conversation. Probably the big one. A couple of characters tell each other about the plan they just executed, even though they're the ones who just executed it. I fully thought we're going to be left guessing about what really went down. There's enough there to connect the dots. Maybe could have dropped a few more hints, but no need to guess because we get the full forced into dialogue report. Look, it doesn't read too clunkily, but unless you're writing for a younger audience, you don't need to spoon feed us hungry readers. Make us think, make us guess, make us work for it. I actually found the uncertainty and the subtext around that whole situation compelling, and the explanation kind of ruins it. It's like, oh, now there's no doubt. I wanted some doubt. I mean, the characters involved are thieves, and Holt especially, he's all about misdirection. You never quite know what you're getting with him. The lack of overt explanation actually suits the character. Side note, Holt, in my opinion, is an interesting and complex character, and I'm curious to see where he goes because, like a few other characters, he could go either way. He's got a villainous streak, but he's not pure evil, at least I don't think he is. Throughout the narrative, there is an underlying theme of morality, and characters are forced to decide whether torture, murder, or other seemingly horrific acts are justified in the name of the greater good. They're frequently forced to make tough decisions, and I love a good moral dilemma. Like I said, no easy wins here. Alright, let's talk about Cassius, a real standout character. For the wrong reasons. Look, among the other viewpoint characters, he does work, but for most of the story, he's your typical semi-flat action hero type. Much of his storyline is filled with action movie cliches. There are several scenes where I'm just thinking, haven't I already seen this 700 times in various action movies over the years? Maybe that is an intentional archetype, but the other characters are so unique and nuanced that Cassius is unflavored porridge in comparison. With that said, because the other characters are so complex, he does provide some balance. He's the clear hero type who would rescue a baby from a burning building in the most action movie cliche way possible. Some stuff does go down towards the end that makes me think Cassius is going to get some serious character development in the next book. If that is the case, I can forgive the action hero cliche for the most part. Also, if the book's ever reissued, I'd recommend giving it another edit. I know this won't bother most people as much as it bothers me, but I struggle to turn off my editor brain when I'm reading text. That's why audiobooks have been such a godsend. I can switch off that sentence level editor in my head and focus on the big picture. But when you edit books full time, like with any job, you develop an autopilot editing brain, and even when you're trying to read for enjoyment, every error, there's an error. Every error triggers a mental alarm. With that said, there isn't a book-breaking number of errors, and I know most people will breeze straight through and not notice as many of the whoopsies as I did, which might be why they're still there. Alright, let's discuss the ending. So, you do need to read the Scion conspiracy as part of the wider Crucible of Legacy series. I wasn't totally satisfied with the ending. I don't feel like we got complete resolutions to everyone's arc. There's no, we accomplished this or we failed at this. It's more like, we're still doing this, still figuring it out, not sure what we're doing really. It's a satisfying read overall, but don't expect a clean conclusion. And don't expect a clean conclusion to this video. I'm starting to lose my voice. Look, I could have ended there, would have felt right, but I have some final words like Jerry Springer's final thoughts. Anyway, critiques aside, I'll always find something to whinge about. The Scion Conspiracy is an enjoyable read. Simple yet descriptive, sometimes overly descriptive prose, plenty of conspiracy and political intrigue, well-crafted characters, genuine conflict and tension, a well-built world. The series has a lot of potential. I do feel like I was left hanging with the ending, but it doesn't make me want to rage quit the series. It's clearly building up to something, and I want to know what that something is. In my opinion, the Crucible of Legacy is shaping up to be a great fantasy series. It's both original and comfortingly familiar, if that even makes sense, and the overall plot is compelling. I'm just happy the first indie submission was good, and I didn't have to burn it to a crisp, but there's always the next one. If you enjoyed this video, hit subscribe. If you didn't enjoy this video, hit subscribe anyway, and hate watch my content. That's always fun.